There's a memorial to this brave little boy in Palmdale, which is visited daily, but every year on his birthday, people descend in droves to leave flowers and balloons celebrating Gabriel's special day. Many of them never knew him, but like many of you watching, have been touched by his story, love him nonetheless, and will never forget Gabriel Daniel Fernandez, who was born on the 20th of February 2005 and returned to God on the 24th of May 2013, aged 8 years old. Rest in eternal peace, little buddy. This case is one of the most horrific that I've covered, matched only by the evil of the two perpetrators, Gabriel Fernandez and Cesar, both are the absolute scum of the earth. Gabriel completely violated the trust of her own son, and Cesar was a grown man who thought nothing of beating a child who was a fraction of his size and weight. In order to understand what happened, we have to look at both of the main perpetrators. As I said earlier in this video, it's not clear what is true regarding what Gabriel disclosed about her childhood, specifically the allegations of rape and abuse, which her family said she made up to gain sympathy. However, I have no doubt some of what she said is true. Gabriel Fernandez is clearly a woman who began life in an extremely toxic environment, likely without love and subject to abuse, whether this was physical or sexual or both. She grew up with no empathy or compassion for others. This isn't surprising. I doubt she was shown any of these traits when she was growing up, and so never developed them. However, an important thing she was taught was that homosexuality was wrong, and that gay people were less than human. To be clear, the issue of sexuality is relevant to this case, but not to the extent that's reported in some articles. Gabriel was not killed specifically because Gabriel and Cesar thought he was gay. This was just one factor in their decision making. But this negative perception of people, of other sexualities, indicates a more global way of thinking. Gabriel was able to demonise other people, placing herself above them. It wasn't just gay people she was better than. She's a narcissist. She thought she was better than everyone. The world revolved around her, and she was entitled to do whatever she wanted. To help her, she would recruit useful idiots to her cause. She went from man to man, and I've no doubt that each fit a certain mould, likely emotionally or intellectually stunted. Men who she could control and manipulate, and if they stepped out of line, she would abuse them. I think that having men in her life that she could dominate had two primary benefits to her. Firstly, Gabriel could fund her lifestyle. I've no doubt she never earned a penny in her life. She would manipulate and abuse these men to get their money. However, they were also an outlet for her rage. Gabriel Fernandez was an extremely angry woman, someone who never dealt with the trauma in her own life, and instead felt a sense of power and control, and made herself feel better by abusing her intimate partners. She had been a victim, and she was going to make damn sure that others felt like she'd done. One of the idiots she ended up with was Cesar, a man who was described as intellectually slow, someone who was desperate to hold on to his intimate partners. He was the perfect mark. Gabriel could twist him around her little finger. Her children were merely welfare checks, a way to fund her lifestyle. I've no doubt that her older children were neglected and abused, and they learned over the years to not go up against her. They were her property, nothing more. And then Gabriel came into the picture. Again, he was just a means to an end. He was another welfare check. I imagine Gabriel was someone who lived well beyond her means and needed the extra income. I think initially Gabriel was abused because, unlike the other children, he was not beaten down. He was a happy little boy who just wanted to be loved. I imagine he wanted attention from his mum, likely even calling her that, which would have made her blood boil. How dare this thing talk to me? And so she beat him. Gabriel was another way for her to feel strong and powerful. Dominating her son made someone else the victim. Whether Gabriel thought that Gabriel was actually gay is unclear, but I think this is what she told herself to dehumanise him. Homosexuals, she'd been taught, were the lowest form of life, so labelling Gabriel as gay meant that he deserved everything that happened to him. As to why Cesar got involved, I think there were two reasons. The primary reason was impressing Gabriel, making sure the relationship carried on. I've no doubt he would beat Gabriel and then look at Gabriel and see if she approved. She hated him, so he hated him too. She beat him, and so he beat him too. He also shared the same homophobic attitudes and beliefs as Gabriel, which enabled him to consider this little boy to be less than nothing, and this is why he told the authorities that he was gay, because in his twisted mind, everyone felt the same way about homosexuals, and I firmly believe he thought detectives would pull a face, showing their disdain, and even potentially they would have said something like, "I would have done the same thing." Behind the scenes, I imagine that Gabriel was whispering in Cesar's ear that a real man would beat Gabriel, as well as likely using sex as a reward. However, secondly, Cesar did this because he's a violent man, a man who had likely had violent fantasies all of his life, but had never been able to act on them. There is no way that someone goes from nothing to doing what he did without this already being inside of him. The rest of the world didn't see this, but Pearl did. She recognised people's evil and their weakness, and she could exploit both. I believe that both Pearl and Cesar came up with even more depraved ways to torture Gabriel. Her because she loved violence, she got off on the pain and suffering of others. Him because he felt that escalating the abuse would impress Pearl more. They were a union of evil, bringing out the very worst in each other. Pearl was not smart on paper, but she was extremely good at manipulating people. She has spent years twisting social workers in knots, and when she was presented with a naive woman, fresh on the job, she must have rubbed her hands with glee. With every visit, where Gabriel, as he'd been coached, said that everything was okay, she and Cesar felt invincible, and the abuse got worse and worse. And this ended with Cesar beating Gabriel to death. In the aftermath, neither could even pretend they cared. I don't think either has the capacity to feel anything for anyone but themselves. This was highlighted front and centre by Pearl's pathetic apology at her sentencing. I've no doubt that Gabriel Fernandez still, to this day, sits in her cell thinking she did nothing wrong. She is pure evil, and I hope she lives a long and miserable life behind bars. With regards to Cesar Aguirre, I imagine he spent a lot of time after the sentence still simpering after Pearl, believing that she still loved him, and he'd done all of this for her. As the years have rolled on, I hope that he's realised just how fucked he really is, that he's thrown his life away, and he'll end his days either alone in a prison cell or lying on an execution gurney with a needle in his arm. This was a very heavy case, and I hope you guys are okay. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. You guys know how to support the channel, so please do so if you wish. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.